All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Modus RX audio experience. I am joined by a very, very special guest today, our very own Haley Hestekin. How are you doing today, Haley?
Good. How are you? I'm glad to be on there.
Yeah, I'm good. It's a little rainy in the background, if you can see, so nothing better to do than, I guess, to talk a little bit about you and softball.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Haley is our marketing assistant here, but figured it'd be a good idea to have you on the podcast to talk a little bit about your experience with your softball career, the physical nature of what you do, how physical preparation and rehab has helped you, and then also get, probably just as important, get your take on the mental side of things. And um, you are, a little bit of a different stage of your life now, obviously, but you're still in the softball world and helping out. And I'm sure you're saying a lot of similar things, really, really rock solid advice based on your experiences with the athletes that you're working with now. And so I think it's going to be good to hear your take and get some of this out to the public a little bit more. So I think that's our big goal for today, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to talk about any of that stuff.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, Haley's just coming off a little bit of a illness, if you will, a little crackly voice. So we're gonna give her some we're going to give her some help today as much as possible. If you got a drink or anything you need, no worries. And likewise, I do as well, but we'll bear with it. And thanks for battling through the crackly voice and the lost voice syndrome that you just came off of. We'll start with everybody's favorite question. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay, so I've always been from the area. So I was in Oshkosh for about until 7th grade. Then I moved to Kaukauna. And then I played softball there, won a state championship my senior year. Whoop, whoop. So that was awesome. And then was lucky enough to continue my career at UW-Madison. So played 4 years there, have about 400 or so innings under my belt as a pitcher at UW-Madison. And then just graduated this past May and moved back to the area because I am the biggest homebody. And
Really? Really didn't know that.
I have no idea. And so then secured a position as the marketing assistant here, which is awesome and I love it. And then also give back to the community still at 360U. Give lessons in the softball world, can't get it out of my veins kind of thing.
Yep. Excellent. And just a little plug for Haley. She's doing an awesome job as our marketing assistant here. So, it'll be interesting to see her edit her own guest appearance on a podcast. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with here. So obviously a lot of history in sports, athletics, and softball. So I'm going to be excited to talk a little bit more about that. But I guess I'm always interested, now having kids of my own. When did you know that softball was going to really be your jam, your thing that you were going to go after with a vengeance, and what drew you into it so much?
So it's so funny that you asked that question because I hated softball when I first started. My mom signed me up for coach pitch and said, "You're going to do this." No, I'm not. I don't like it. And I was a kid picking dandelions out in the outfield. I was doing my hair and I could not wait for my first year of rec ball to be done. Right. So it was coach pitch, whatever. Well, the last game, there was a pitcher on my team and a pitcher on the other team who could actually pitch. Okay. And so they let these girls pitch. And I was just mesmerized. Like, I thought this was the coolest thing ever. And I got up to the batter's box and I whiffed 3 times and went back to the dugout and was happy as could be just because I thought it was so cool. And I got in the car and I said, "Mom, I'm going to do that." And she kind of looked at me in the rearview mirror and that really confused her. So I thought we were going to be done, like what's going on kind of thing.
Yep.
And from there, I was literally begging her to go outside. I was outside in the morning. I'd wake up first thing. I'd be in my nightgown still. I was 8 years old and I'd throw into the fence. And the fence started to curl so much at the end because I'd thrown so many balls into it. But I just fell in love with pitching. I was begging them. And from there, like again, my parents looked at me like I was crazy. I started playing for a travel ball team, and back then the Oshkosh Raiders, which I don't think they exist anymore.
Okay.
um, but I said, "Mom, Dad, I'm gonna get a Division One scholarship," and I was 8, and they're like, "You're 8. Like, what do you know?" But if there's one thing you'll know about me is that I am persistent and that I will work for anything that I set my mind to. And that was something that I set my mind to. And I was lucky enough, and the opportunities kind of fell in my lap, and my parents were so supportive along the way and gave me that opportunity to do it. So
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
I set my mind to.
So the thrill of kind of having the ball in your hand and being the one that was going to dictate what was happening from the mound and being the center of attention and all that good stuff, huh?
I mean, I guess when you put it that way, yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. Okay, so then switching gears as you went through, obviously you had this goal and you were persistent and you had a pretty fortunate to have a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do moving forward. Do you think there was a time when you started to realize that my persistence, my efforts, my practice, it's not enough? I need a little bit more help on the physical training, kind of body enhancement side of things to improve your sport performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you start when you're young. Like, you're not going to start lifting weights until you're at
Sure.
least in like middle schoolish, I would think.
Right.
Um, so once I got to that point, it's like, I wonder what this can do, right? And I was obviously, I said, persistent, wanted to be the best that I could be. Um, and so in high school, I um, generally was working out. I knew it was important. Like, I wanted to be strong, like being strong, could throw harder. Like, this is great. Like, I still thought I was gonna grow. Like, both my parents are 6 foot and I'm 5'7". Um, so I thought I was gonna grow more. I didn't, unfortunately. um, but I was kind of banking on that to give me a little bit more power, a little
Sure.
more longer circumference going around, but it didn't happen. It's all right. But I wish I would have trained a little bit more specific. Like, I went to the gym. I really didn't know what I was doing. Like, lifting weights, like, supposed to help my performance, right? I had no plan. I didn't have a trainer. Like,
Yep.
I was just going for it kind of thing. So, um, when I think about an area that could have been better when I was there, I think it was that. And I didn't really realize it until I was in college.
Okay.
So again, super fortunate to be in a position where what I was doing was enough, right? I might have been doing something halfway decent, right? Halfway right.
Yep.
Just going on my own. But collegiate athletics pushes you farther than you ever thought that you could. And my sophomore year, I kind of took a step back and was like, what could I be doing better? Right? Because there's always going to be somebody who is going to be on your tail, and there's always going to be somebody who wants your same position. Unfortunately, as a pitcher, like, that is something that you can't do it all. Like, you cannot physically pitch every single game. So um, it was, how do I continue to have that one up? And physical training was something that I needed to do. So I took a step back and said, okay, what area can I get better at? And I think it was that. Specifically, I realized you could do all the training in the world, right? We worked out 20 to 30, 40 hours a week. But if you don't eat right, you don't fuel your body right, you don't do any of that stuff, you're not going to see any results.
Yep.
So I really changed the way that I ate. I changed the way that I fueled my body, and so that I was able to get the most out of my workouts. And then, thought about the aspects that I could get better at. And one of the things that I think, especially as a pitcher, is super important is your core. right? I was always that person that went to the gym, like, yeah, woo, let's go to the gym. And I'd be there for an hour and a half. Like I do my strength training, I'd go on the elliptical, it was great. And I'm like, I'm tired, I don't want to do core. That's what everybody does. I think that's a common story, right?
Yep.
I'd skip out on it. And um, I look back and I see all the pictures of me pitching and I'm like this, right? My core is completely unengaged. Well, I look at it now, I'm like, well, that's all power that had I been engaging my core, I could have been getting into my pitch, maybe throwing 1 or 2 miles an hour faster. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you are in it, 1 or 2 miles an hour is a swing and miss or
Yep.
a weak ground ball,
Yep.
and rather than a base hit. So,
Yep.
something that I wish I would have done.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the physical training, it's kind of like a lot of things in life. Once you solve one problem, you realize there's another problem, right? And so you noticed a need for physical training, and then you realize that physical training was good, but you needed the nutrition, right? And I'd probably take it a step further for a lot of people is once you get to that level, it's great, but then you realize how important recovery is. And I've gotten really, really deep into the power of sleep and recovery, and obviously the mental health and helping kind of calm down the nervous system after all this stimulus and activity. And you start to realize that it's kind of almost just as important as the physical training, because without that balance, it's all can go for naught. And so that's something else I would add to it is I do see a fair number of our junior athletes. It's common to go practice right after school, get some dinner, and then go hit an individual practice or a different sport after dinner. They get home, it's 9 o'clock. Now I got homework until midnight, and this is the story that I'm hearing, week in, week out, and I can pretty much guarantee that there's not enough sleep or recovery happening in those situations as well. So that's just another aside for any of the parents or junior athletes that are listening is I would start to place sleep and recovery at the same level as physical training and performance training.
I think that's a really great point, and the thing is, it's not convenient.
No.
So like even when you talk about you go home, right? I'd go back to my dorm. And what do they have there? They have a burger and curly fries. It's Wing Wednesday, all this stuff. Ooh, This sounds so good, right? And they got a nice little ice cream parlor. Great, right? That's what I did. You can swipe your meal card, fine. Right? It's convenient. It's easy, right? None of this stuff is easy.
Yeah.
That's what I think a lot of people have to remember is it's going to take time and you're going to have to invest in it. And the one thing I was really good about though is I made sure I was in bed by 9:30 every night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
a lot of my teammates they said, Haley, what? Don't you have homework? I said, I'm going to run around crazy all day and I'm going to not have a spare minute, but I'm going to make sure I go to bed at 9:30. And I think that is one thing that allowed me to have the energy that I did. Like you said, you just have to get sleep. And especially if you're training that hard, it has to be, for me, it was at least 8 hours. And you need to know how many you need.
Yep.
It's a little bit different for everybody, but I think the research is like about that, isn't it? 8 hours, 7 to 8.
Yeah, it's going to all be dependent on your activity levels. So it's scary to think if you did have a 2 or 3 hour training session in a day and you had a night of poor sleep before that, your sleep demands or your sleep requirements are actually probably a lot higher than what most people even give themselves. But it is funny because everybody wants a cheat card or an easy button, and that's hard. But I would make the argument that sleep is the closest thing to your cheat button. It'll let you get away with a bad meal here or missing out on a training there. If you can get proper sleep, it's going to help boost your performance and recovery, probably more than anything else. So, all right. So I guess that's kind of the physical side of things. We'll maybe circle back to that a little bit, but I guess you've been through a really, really long, successful career. I don't know if I've talked to you much about this in our time together, but I guess I'm interested to hear is if you look back, what is one thing that you wish you knew earlier? That if you would have known it at that time, would have really kind of catapulted you both performance wise, but almost more importantly, just on a happiness, enjoyment, satisfaction level.
Yeah, I it's super important to talk about, right? I think you can talk about all the things that can make you better, but if you aren't happy or your mental health is taking a toll, it's going to be really, really hard to do all those other things. So for me, the biggest thing that I wish I would have realized earlier in my career is that um, your sport, for me, it was softball, is something that you do. It's not who you are.
Mm,
And by this, I mean, like, I used to have awful performance anxiety. And unfortunately, it literally affected everything that I did. Like, I would not sleep the night before. And um, honestly, became dependent on melatonin to be able to sleep because otherwise I wouldn't. And I would be up all night. I wouldn't be able to concentrate on schoolwork because I'd be thinking about the really good batter that has 20 home runs that I have to face. And it's only 20 games into the season, so they're averaging 1 home run and they're leading the RBI. Now I have to pitch to them. And I would go down this rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, I need to do well. If I don't do well, I'm going to let everyone down. I'm going to have 0 friends. I'm a failure in life. And I associated my identity in sport as who I am as a person. And that is extremely unhealthy.
yep.
So unhealthy, right? So I would quite literally ride those highs and lows, right? I did great. I'm awesome. I'm doing great at life. Like, I'm going to get a great job out of college. Is any of that associated with each other? Absolutely not. But I
Right.
thought it was,
Yep.
right? Again, extremely unhealthy, but I let my entire identity be determined by softball. And for those of you who don't know much about softball, it's a game of failure. And so this makes it even more of a toxic relationship, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, for softball, a great batting average is 300, which means you are failing 7 out of 10 times. And now I didn't hit, but I was a pitcher and the strike zone has gotten smaller and smaller, right? And the bats have gotten better and better. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how good the bats are. You can just touch the ball. I literally have given up check swing home runs. Like, that's how
Mm-hmm.
good the bats are. Um, and quite frankly, just spent many, many nights calling home to my parents, believing that I sucked at my sport and that everyone else thought I sucked. And just a little blurb, like, your mental health matters, right? Um, it wasn't until my senior year of college that I finally figured out that my sport is something that I do and it's not who I am. Maybe it was because I was so close to being done. Um, but it wasn't until then that I was truly able to separate my softball life from my personal life. And I really, really did try and do that. And when I was a senior, it was okay, when I'm at softball practice, this is great. I'm at softball practice and I'm going to give it 110% and be the hard worker that I am. But when I go home, I'm a student and I am a daughter and I am a Christian and I'm going to do these things. I'm a coffee lover. Like, I'm going to make my coffee. I'm going to make my breakfast. I'm going to study and I'm going to focus on that, and really, really made a conscious effort to separate those two. So otherwise they would get really intertwined and it was just super unhealthy. Um, so I knew I was always going to have my loving family, my friends. I knew I was going to be a great student, and my professors probably like, oh yeah, we care about sports, but they're probably not going to check the scores. They're not going to look at you every weekend and say, how did you do? Like,
Sure.
they got more things to worry about than that,
Yep.
you know? So I knew I was always going to be that passionate, tender-hearted, and hardworking person that I was, no matter what I did, and just finally started to understand that. But it's so hard when you're in it to really take that step back, right? Because you feel the pressure. You feel you need to perform or your spot's gone. You need to get in better condition or your spot's gone, right? And you do whatever you need to do to play, right? You want to play, you're competitive, you want to win. You
Yep.
want to be the best at what you do. That's what you've known your whole life. So it gets hard when, you kind of do that. And um this is such a topic I'm so passionate about because I wish that I would have realized it sooner. And I think that more people need to come to terms with this sooner, right? Um, I've talked to one too many athletes um, that they just believe their sport is their entire world.
Right.
And by no means am I saying that sports is a crime. I love sports. I'm still coaching. Like I
Mhm.
still love sports. Sports are always on in my household. We plan our weekends around the Badger football games and the Packer football games. Like I love sports.
Yep.
But we need to start instilling in athletes that their confidence has to come from other sources. Because if my sport is all that I'm confident in, then I have one bad performance and it trickles into every aspect of my life. Right. And it also, I'm not getting sleep. I'm not taking care of my body. And if I'm not getting sleep, I'm not recovering. If I'm not recovering, I'm not getting the most on my workouts. So
Mm.
it all circles back. And I think there just needs to be an emphasis on confident people first, confident athletes second.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting as you were saying all that. I come bring it back, not to bring it back to me, but I think it'll make some sense in any aspect that you're in. And I heard this from one of my coaches. Yes, I still have coaches, and it's about how you identify. Um, and if you identify with yourself as a softball player, if you identify, you ask who am I or what am I? You identify with yourself as a business owner. You identify with yourself as a father, um, and you place so much emphasis on these things that that's who you are. The problem with those things is that you don't have control over them. You don't have control over a single thing that happens, and so you're putting your happiness, you're putting your outcomes in the hands of things that technically really you just don't have full control over, right? I mean, like you said, you can have a check swing home run, you did everything great, on your end, and it's still not the outcome you wanted, and now you're identifying, okay, I failed, right? So, and this is probably a little deeper for some of the junior athletes right now, but I hope that it's registering on a certain extent with what you're talking about. Is if in every single situation you start to identify yourself as a learner, then your happiness is limitless. Your confidence is limitless. Your satisfaction is limitless, because going into every situation and saying, I'm a learner, I'm growing, that's the only way that you can take back control of what's happening. If you identify with anything else or as anything else, it's an external locus of control. And so it's out of your control, which becomes like a crazy train ride mentally and emotionally. So it's the same thing then. As a business owner, it's not a good day, it's a bad day, it's a learning day. As a softball player, it's not a good day, it's or a bad day, it's a learning day. As a father, my kids, I did everything right. They're still going to run around and punch each other and wrestle and want to throw each other through the window. I'm learning about how I can maybe do things differently next time. So just a little, it's interesting because I just heard this. I just went over this, and then you bring that up there, and it kind of matches pretty significantly in alignment with the type of thing that I wish more people, more athletes, and more individuals in general would know about and think about. And it's hard. I mean, it's not to say that, oh, okay, all right, now, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be a learner. Okay, now, okay, every single situation, yeah, I'm a learner, I'm happy, I'm a learner, I'm happy. I mean, we're humans, so you go back to success and failure, and judge yourself by that. But if you can, it's a skill and a craft to hone to go into every situation and be a learner in that situation, and whatever happens, learn from it, right?
Right.
If you get,
Right.
if my kids get an A on a test or a C on a test, do I really care about the grade that much? I care about what they learned about themselves in that situation. So um hopefully that registers a little bit with some people out there. And I think again, deeper than maybe we need to get on a Thursday morning, but I think it also circles back to just staying present in the moment and not worrying so much about the outcome and what's going to happen next. And that's, again, very challenging. We're humans. We default to what could go wrong, but the more present you can be in the moment, the Michael Jordans of the worlds, the Giannis's of the worlds, this is what they do best. They stay present in the moment.
Yeah. I love that. My dad always told me, he said, Haley, you never fail. You only fail if you don't learn something from the situation. So,
hmm hmm And again, somebody will look at it and say, bumper sticker, whatever. That's cliche. No, I mean it's generally, it's one of the absolute truths is if you can get your mind to wrap around that, it could be the keys to so many things in life. So, all right,
mhm.
that's enough depth. I think for some of our listeners for a Thursday rainy morning here, but let's get back into, I guess, more on the topic of how physical performance and some of the things that we're working with our junior athletes. Let's bring it into softball. And, I guess what I'm going to say is out of any of the rotational athletes I work with, it tends to really be kind of universal. So we're gonna bring it back to softball. But if you're softball, baseball, golf, hockey, pitcher, hitter, I mean, it's all rotational and it's all energy transferring through your body. So what are some of the key aspects of the physical performance side that you think are really important for pitching, but likely for hitting as well?
Yeah. So, I talked about it a little bit with my core, but I
Yep.
also would like to, add my legs and my glutes, surprisingly. So based on all the pictures that I had, like I was completely unengaged with my core, not engaged, tightened, and really transferring that energy into my pitch, right? Which is all rotational. Pitching is a rotational activity.
Yep.
And again, that's just because I just didn't invest the time in it. I didn't see the value in it when I was younger, 16 to 21. It's like, what is core really going to do for me? Like, it's more important to get stronger in your legs or your arms, right? But I bring it back to, as far as my legs and my glutes go, super silly. And this is what I teach on every week to my little kids. I ask them a question, my little pictures. What's stronger, your arms or your legs? And they look at me like I'm nuts. And they're like, your legs, Coach Haley, duh. I'm like, okay, yeah, obviously, duh, right? But then let's use them, right? Let's figure out, like, how can I activate my leg, right? Because if I'm just stepping out versus pushing out, using my hips, using my core that goes with it, right? Because I can say, yeah, your legs are what's stronger, but it's the force that you create with your legs that trickles into your core that you're able to get that whip to ultimately bring that hip through and generate more power, right? And correct me
hmm
if I'm wrong. I think
Nope.
that's the fundamentals of it, as far as physical aspects go. So, but it's the same thing for hitting, right? So, I want to have a little bit of a leg like I would with pitching, where I'm going to be able to rotate those hips, engage my core, and transfer the energy in my legs from the ground into the ball,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So the same but different. So I think it would be beneficial if you could explain a little bit more of what exactly like that rotational training would look like. Cause I wish I would have dove into it a little bit more as my time as an athlete. And what are some things that these junior athletes can be doing to start getting that?
Yep. Um, so I think it's easiest to start with realistically what's happening when you pitch or when you hit. And it's at the basics of it all, it's a transfer of energy from the ground to your legs, through your core, through your shoulders, to your arm, to the ball or the bat to the ball. And it actually happens in that sequence, right? So if you took a graph, I don't want to freak people out with graphs, but if you took a graph and you said over time, what happens in what order, it goes ground reaction force, legs, core, shoulders, arms, hand or ball or bat or golf club. And Then I look at it and I ask, I would ask somebody like you, kind of what's stronger, arms or legs? I mean, I would ask, how do you think this would go if you didn't have legs? How do you think this would go if you didn't have a core? How
Like
do you
that.
think this would go if you didn't have arms, right? Because what happens with a lot of people is obviously, hopefully you're able to incorporate all of these things, but most of us will have a deficiency somewhere. And so if that energy is going through the body and it's supposed to be building as we get to the arms and the hands, if there's a breakdown if there's a deficiency somewhere in strength, first of all, then that transfer doesn't happen as efficiently. And we obviously don't get to that endpoint of release with the ball or swinging the bat with as much pop as we would like. So the first thing you got to do is you got to have strength of legs, strength of core, strength of upper body. And then that's not enough, right? So that's kind of like the prerequisite. If you put all this in a pyramid, strength is the bottom period. Well, probably mobility, having relative ability to move, right? And then strength. But then that's not enough. You have to be able to put it all together and sequence it with speed. So we call that power training, right? Which would be I can take that energy and I can powerfully transfer it through my body. And so after we do, like, I think what you talked about is you were doing strength at some point. High school, maybe a little bit of strength. You didn't have order with it necessarily, or you didn't have a good solid plan, but you were doing strength. So it's kind of like, okay, you're there. I mean, you're at the baseline, which is great. But what athletes after that strength, because they need that in order to do power, you can't have power without strength. In order to generate that power and that speed, you have to have strength. So the next thing then is, how do I move fast? How do I sequence that? And how do I move fast? So a lot of the rotational stuff that we do is going to involve now taking a lighter object like a medicine ball or a speed stick or a lighter band. And we're going to actually have you go through a drill where you don't have to think about much. You just have to say, how quickly can I shot put this medicine ball? How quickly can I whip this club around? And we're trying to get you to use the ground and then transfer that through your body as fast as possible. And so you can train fast, right? I mean, you have to actually, in order to swing fast or pitch fast, you have to train fast. So medicine ball rotational drills are really important. There's a lot of jumping. So in order to use the ground and react with the ground well, like box jumps and vertical jump, power-based plyometric training is really, really good to start to get using the ground in the first place. And then a lot of different types of like slams. So medicine ball slam or anything else that you really, sandbag or sandball. Again, slamming it and saying, I'm just going to try to break this thing open. I'm going to go as hard as I can because that's, at the end of the day, it doesn't look like softball. It doesn't look like baseball. It doesn't look like golf, but it's transferring energy from your legs to your arms fast. And so that's the next step that a lot of people are probably missing. They're not thinking about, okay, I'm strong, but now how do I use that strength and get my muscles to operate fast? We either don't have the resources, we don't know how, or we just haven't even thought of it typically in most cases.
So is it figuring out how to transfer that strength appropriately, a better way to put it, kind of thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Because if you, again, it's like we talked about before, performance, nutrition, recovery. It's like once you figure one thing out, okay, now there's this other thing. So once you get strength, that's great. That's the basis, but it's not enough. So now that I have this strength, how do I learn to use it really, really efficiently and quickly? And that's what some of the power-based training and speed-based training is all about. And then once you put that together, now you're an athlete.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And then even with that rotational stuff, it's so broken down and so niched that you can almost see how it's going to directly correlate to what you're going to do. Right. So if I'm going to do like a rotational med ball
Yep.
row, right?
Yep.
I'm going to work on twisting these hips, right? Well, when I'm hitting, what am I doing? I'm thrusting those hips forward, right? It's the same thing, but now I'm trying to teach my body how to move fast, you know?
Correct. And if you
Okay.
think about what happens a lot too, is if you're, somebody might ask, well, wouldn't just like working on hitting improve my speed? If you're intentionally swinging hard, sometimes the goal with practice is the outcome is hitting the ball where you want and making contact and all that. So that's obviously an important piece of performance and getting better, but there has to be an intentional focus on speed. Like you have to be fresh and going all out for like 4 to 6 reps and then resting for a while, right? And that's not what most people are doing when they're practicing or anything else. It's
Right.
repetition, time after time after time, and not necessarily the focus on the max intent. So you're spot on in terms of there's an overall transfer there, but the problem is if you're using actual practice, hitting or pitching as your training, your speed training, you're so focused on the outcome, which there's accuracy and there's all this other stuff associated with it, that it's not the mindless how fast can I move in this period of time. So there is a big difference between those two things. So all right, so I am up against it with the clock here. All right, I got a client arriving soon, but I do have one question that for any of our guests, I always like to have them impart their wisdom with us in kind of an all-encompassing fashion, and preferably for the audience that would be listening. So if you had one piece of advice, let's boil it down to one piece of advice that you could give to the athletes that you coach, what would you go with?
Uh, hmm. It's tough because I could go so many different directions with this. But I think this kind of encompasses everything. But gosh darn it, just believe in yourself. Like, don't where the fun gets taken out of the game is when you start to make it more than what it is. And it's a game, right? And my goodness, have some fun on the field, right? Show some passion, have energy, enjoy the time with your teammates and be competitive, right? You're out there because you love to compete and you're passionate about the sport. Like, bring out the best in others, right? You get to play the game. Like, why? Hopefully because you love it,
Hmm.
right? Not everyone gets to play, and not everyone is even lucky enough to say that they can participate in something that they are that passionate about, and you get to do that, and I think that's really cool.
Right.
And I wish I would have appreciated that a little bit more, and then even adding on to that a little bit, so go back and thank your parents, right? Like, you don't get to do all of this without them, and that's something that I wish I would have done more of. I always thank my dad whenever I caught for him because whenever he caught for me and not the
Yep.
other way around.
Yep.
Um, because he was passionate about me getting better. And so he would spend his Sunday afternoons, whatever day it was, 3 days a week, out there in our backyard catching me. And he doesn't have to do that, right? Your parents don't have to pay for you to play the sport, but they do it because they love you and they know that you enjoy it and this is something that you love. So you wouldn't be anywhere without them, and be sure that you thank them. But ultimately, after you do that, right, believe in yourself and have fun.
Love it. Love it. Very, very important. Very, very important. These are games after all. I think it's important to remember these are games. Okay. Well, I think that's excellent. I appreciate your time today, Haley. Obviously, continue to thank you for all you're doing as our marketing assistant. We've loved having you aboard with us here, and I think the big takeaway today is there's obviously a large mental aspect to what we're doing along with the physical. I do think they go hand in hand, and it's hard to have one without the other, of course. But appreciate your insight. And if anybody has any specific questions for Haley or about how we operate with our rotational athletes in terms of physical training and performance, certainly feel free to reach out to us. Our lovely marketing assistant, Haley, is going to give you plenty of options on the intro for this podcast about how to do that. So once again, Haley, thank you so much. Appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
And everybody else, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we will be back soon.